Our next topic is go-to-market effectively and efficiently with Michelle Sundquist. You're probably very familiar with Michelle. Not only has she done a number of our presentations in the past, but she's worked on a lot of our clients' products. So it's possible you've worked directly with her and had the privilege to do so. Everything we've talked about today has one common goal, and it's to create a high-quality product that tastes good, that's dosed correctly, and get it to market. So Michelle is going to talk about getting the product to market effectively and efficiently, which is one of our most requested topics. And we couldn't ask for a better teacher. She's had over 1,500 viewers register for her webinars over this past summer. She brings 20 years experience and has developed over 200 products. So this is definitely the go-to person for product development here. So on that note, I will let Michelle take it away.
All right, I'm excited to be here. So you have an awesome product idea. Our job is really to help you make it a reality quickly. So this comes down from ideation, concept creation, concept design, formula development, scale up, commercialization, and launching your product. So our focus is to help you get to market quickly and successfully. Zach talked a little bit about our 150 years of collective experience at our company. So if you really think about that 150 years, this is in different industries, this is with different products, this is with different formats, and this is with different regulatory markets. So all of that creates an environment where we're really good at overcoming obstacles really early in the process so we can continue to keep moving forward. So getting started, your concept, who's it for and what's your goal? We're going to start by just a little case study here, and we're going to talk to you about Heinz, Easy Squirt Colored Ketchup. It's kind of a fun one. In 2000, Heinz launched their green ketchup. They sold 25 million bottles. They captured 40% of the market share. 2 years later, they extended to purple, pink, orange, teal, and blue varieties. So let's do backstory. Their target audience was kids. Their timing, they launched with the release of Shrek. So they had movie tie-in with their green. Again, they waited 2 years to launch their next color. So let's talk about food trends at the time, really mom trends, right? So moms are focused on health. They want lower sugar, they want natural colors, and they want healthy choices for kids. So let's talk about how the ketchup was made. So in order to make it green, there are green tomatoes. It was not made with green tomatoes. They actually stripped out all of the things that made it red in order to get it to a non-red color. Then they added color back in. So they added artificial green color back in. Because of this, they couldn't actually call it ketchup anymore. So that's why it was called Easy Squirt. So at the same time, because they stripped out so many things in order to make the color really vibrant, didn't have a lot of nutritional value. So they added vitamin C back in order to make the moms happy. So parental concerns. It ended up doing really well when it was green. 2 years later, when they launched the rest of the colors, it failed terribly. They ended up pulling it after about a year. So this is because artificial color has an impact on children, and parents are concerned about it. So they're often researching it. It's in mommy blogs, but artificial colors are bad for kids. So when we talk about this, why did this fail? So their target audience was kids. They marketed to kids. It actually did really well, and it sold really well to kids. So what was wrong? One side, it's not scalable. They weren't actually able to expand into other markets because other markets have restrictions on artificial ingredients and won't allow them. So although it's successful in the US, they couldn't go overseas. So again, we're talking about green ketchup. It was successful because they captured 40% of the market share. So what did this solve? This actually was successful in a market tie-in. Shrek was really popular. Parents were able to buy green ketchup. So they didn't have to buy Shrek candy. They didn't have to buy Shrek soda. They didn't have to buy Shrek popcorn. So it did solve a problem that was out there, but it didn't solve the problem they thought it solved. And therefore, when they extended the rest of their line, it wasn't successful. So we're talking about our concept. So what makes it different? How will your customers learn about it? What was the messaging that'll attract your new customers? And again, what void does that product fill for your customer? Really think about that void. This ketchup filled a void. This kind of Shrek movie tie-in saved parents money because they only had to pay $5 for ketchup, not a t-shirt. But it wasn't the problem they were trying to solve, and therefore it made it really hard for them to be successful when they launched the rest of their lines. So how will it be made? Getting into kind of the nuts and bolts of it all. When we're thinking about speed to market, and this is really talking about speed. We want to get to market fast before our idea becomes obsolete. So our formula, our packaging, and our manufacturing, all of those should be developed in tandem. Your formula is connected to your packaging is connected to your manufacturing will affect your formula. So each of these needs to be considered, and you need to think about the impact they have on each other. The impact is a key factor in determining your shelf life. So having these figured out will help solve that problem as well, and be able to get you to market faster. So other decisions that need to be made that should be closely tied to your market research. We have serving size, dosage per serving, and then your flavor. There's also regulations. So no decision should be made without referring to the regulations. And this should be addressed up front so that you can build it into your formula and your processing. So what are your resources? So when you're moving fast, right, first you want to identify who are your resources? Who are your subject matter experts that can help you move through the process quickly, identify what those obstacles are, come up with solutions quickly for you. So you have your ingredient supplier. Your ingredient supplier, and this is like your flavor, your sugar, all of your ingredients are going into your formula. They need to be consistent. Your ingredient supplier controls that consistency. Your ingredient supplier needs to have the ability to scale up. If you produce your product and then you decide to go big and your ingredient supplier doesn't have enough availability of ingredients in order to scale up with you, that can be a problem. So they should also be willing to share their experience that they've learned off of similar products. And they should be able to help guide you through the regulatory restrictions. So you have your co-man, co-packer. This person should be able to guide you through processing. They should be able to connect you with preferred packaging suppliers. They should also be able to walk you through in detail how they control quality. You need to know what levers that you can modify in order to dial your product in while you're manufacturing it. You should discuss processing options and then any variables that you might need to consider. So market data. So I want you to think about the green ketchup with this. Is anyone else making this? Was it successful? And if so, why was it successful? If you think about the ketchup was successful because it had a promotional tie-in. The other colors were not successful because of that coloring. So you also think, what were their obstacles and what did they do to overcome those obstacles? So you might say, what's Heinz doing now? Do they have other colored ketchups out there? How did they overcome that obstacle? I think they have mystery ketchup now. Are there any notes that can be applied to help you ensure success? So updates on regulatory restrictions. So as you're doing your market research, canvass the market, gather as much information as possible, work with your subject matter experts to get that information, and you're really answering questions, acting as a detective, removing obstacles so you can continue to move forward, and also always keeping your customer in mind. You want to be developing the beverage or your product with your customer in mind. So research is important. You may find that an idea has failed already. If you move quickly, figure out why they failed, incorporate it into your timeline, and then continue to move forward. So let's see. How SōRSE can help you. So as we go through this presentation, I'll go more depth into the 5 ways that we can support you. So we have stability consultation, formula consultation, shelf life testing recommendations, guidance on finding a co-manufacturer, and then connections to the commercialization process. And I'll add some stories and some examples in there to keep you entertained. So stability. What does stability mean? Each of your ingredients is going to interact with each other. So predicting that interaction and determining how stable they are will contribute to your overall shelf life. So for example, a number of natural food colorings are not considered stable in a low pH environment. They're sensitive. So in one side, you may say that's a bit of an obstacle for me. On the other side, there's a lot of products out there that are actually developed using that interaction to create either color changing beverages. You may see like a farmer's market lemonade that like looks like it's electric or looks like it glows. This is actually using that interaction in order to create these vibrant colors. Unfortunately, it doesn't stay that way. It'll eventually fade. So if you put the color into this like really acidic environment, it may be vibrant, and then the next day it may have faded out or possibly even turned to clear. So it's good to know each of your ingredients, how do they react with each other, and what can you do to either try and stabilize that interaction, switch out the ingredient that's not stable, or consider that as part of your shelf life. So packaging interactions. Your packaging can have expected and unexpected interactions. So expected interactions can be found through testing. So you can do shelf life testing in your final packaging, so you can see if there's any sort of changes that happen to your product once it's on a theoretical like shelf. You can review similar products in the marketplace and see what sort of packaging they used, see what sort of shelf life that they have, potentially inspect the product, see if there's any sort of packaging interactions that are happening. And then also examining your raw ingredients with your packaging. See if there's any sort of interactions happening on the inside of the packaging. So then we have homogeneity. Food is always in a constant state of change. So from the time that you pick it off of the bush to the time that you're consuming it, it's slowly changing. There's changes that happen. Some of those changes are good changes. Some of those changes are bad changes, but food is always in a state of change. So food science is used to create methods that slow down or stop that change. Completely stopping change sometimes requires extreme measures and drastic shifts in a product format. So if you think, I'm going to make dinner tonight, I'm going to make lasagna, it's going to be delicious, I'm going to use all fresh ingredients, I'm going to go camping now. I can't make lasagna while I camp, it's a little complicated, but they have freeze-dried lasagna, and I bet it tastes exactly the same as what I'm going to make tonight. So we know that's not true, we wish it was. But in freeze-dried food, we also know we can keep this around for a very long time. It's very likely to not change in texture or format. It will stay just as terrible as it is day one after like a couple of years. So when you think about extending your shelf life, there's different processes that we can use. There's different packaging we can use. There's different ingredients we can use in order to take your product and make it stable. Our goal is to really create a product that reflects your brand and what you want, and then use our science team in order to kind of manipulate it in order to get it to fit into that. So how can we help with making this stability, this homogeneity? We have equipment that we use in order to kind of monitor the change of micro movements of the particles. That and a strong emulsion, and a strong formula, those two combined together will help make a stable product. As Zach mentioned, sometimes we have a base formula and we're adding our emulsion to it. It's not necessarily always as stable as if we gave feedback on the formula and what needed to change in order to make it stable. So that's also one of the reasons why we like to assist people in their formulas, is just to make sure the product is really strong and that you are successful. Oh, yeah, what makes a formula strong? So when your ingredients stop interacting with each other and stay in a constant state for a specific amount of time, then you have a stable formula. So proven packaging, why does that matter? If you want to move fast, you want to limit the amount of like novel or new systems that you're using. Anything that's new needs to be researched, needs to be tested. So anytime that you can have a little bit of turnkey in your process, you'll be able to move a lot faster. Otherwise, innovation is good. It can just sometimes create a little bit of a speed bump. Consistent processing. You need consistent ingredients, formula execution, and processing. One change can potentially throw everything out of balance. Industry proven shelf life. In one of the previous kind of roles that I had, I developed this product that was really similar to like a white chocolate. It was a beautiful light yellow color. Through this process, we did some accelerated shelf life testing. We did accelerated because we wanted to get it to market quickly. So in doing this accelerated testing, we took this sauce and put it in an environmental chamber at temperatures that were over 100 degrees. So through this, as we were pulling samples and kind of inspecting it to see how the accelerated aging process was going, we noticed that it started to turn kind of a brown color. It was caramelizing. So you'd say, if this sauce was sitting on a shelf for a year, would it turn brown? Is that something that's reflective of age? In this case, because we had other environmental chambers at lower temperatures that we're also testing the product in, we knew that that wasn't true. Age doesn't turn it brown. So what turns it brown? This would be temperature. So putting it in a high temperature chamber in order to do accelerated shelf life testing was actually slowly cooking the product. So then we would say that the accelerated shelf life test at that environment wasn't necessarily successful, but we did learn from that. What we learned is that if it is in a warm environment, that the product will continue to cook and potentially turn brown. So this information became valuable when we had a lot that was made, because we're making it back to back over years, that was a little bit darker, almost looked like caramel sauce. So based off of the testing that we had done, we knew that that actually was because it sat in a warm environment for too long somewhere. And we don't know if it was at the factory or if it was on the truck or if it got put palletized and sat in a dock somewhere, where this is. And through that, we were able to go back and research and see, because we knew we needed to find that one factor that said, when did it get to a temperature that was too warm? So it's important to do your testing, but the testing that you do needs to be appropriate for the product that you're testing. Otherwise, the results that you get are more indicative of an abusive environment as opposed to an accelerated shelf life environment. So sometimes when we do accelerated shelf life test, we push our product to extremes. Experience will help you analyze those results to determine how you can incorporate them into the product to determine what effect it has. All right, this is my favorite slide. So why is testing important? When we talk about shelf life testing is really about when your product gets to a point where it reflects your brand and what you want the best. So I want to talk to you about steak. On this slide, I'm going to sell you a steak ager. So about a year ago, I got a steak ager. So it's probably about the beginning of like February. Restaurants weren't serving aged meat anymore because they were closed, and I really wanted to be able to perfect this. So, so with a Steak Ager Pro, it says, when you're ready to take your love of dry aged beef to a higher level of distinction. So that's me. I'm their target audience. So what's a good steak? A good steak, according to Google, is juicy, tender, loaded with flavor, and has a minimum amount of fat. So what's a bad steak? Well, slimy, sticky, smells bad, maybe looks weird. So that would be an expired steak. So what does steak aging do? It removes moisture. It results in a richer, more concentrated flavor. And also, because we're removing the water, it creates a little bit of a drier steak. So when it sears, it's almost like the caramelization of bacon. It's amazing. So if we look at this little graph right here, we can see that we have mild to intense for flavor. So we know that it starts out a little bit mild. Down here we have, or at the bottom, we have number of weeks. And then over to the right, we have tender to more tender. So we've all had steak. We know that when we get to, hold on, see if I can turn on my little color thing here. We've all had steak one day from the grocery store, and we've cooked that steak and eaten it. So we know that it's totally fine. It's considered acceptable there. But I'm aging my steak, and I'm saying that it's not good enough for me. I want to take it a little bit farther, right? So now we have more weeks. So we have this 4 to 6, right? It looks kind of identified a sweet spot here. And then we also have way up here, we have cheesy, mushroomy with a flavor that tastes people like or hate. So to be honest, I've done the 8 weeks of aging, and I did find I didn't really like it up here. It's a kind of a strange flavor. It's a little too concentrated. Wasn't really what I was going for. So I would say for my brand, my best buy for my Steak Ager steak would be this little green square right here. So is it expired if it goes out of that? No, it's not expired. It just doesn't represent my brand. If I have my steak fresh and I decide to pull it early because maybe I need to get it out faster, is it bad? Is it out of spec? It would be out of my specification. It wouldn't be considered bad, but for my kind of sweet spot where I want my customer, potentially, which would be me, to consume it, I want it right here. So when we talk about product that kind of falls out of that spec, that's when your product, maybe it's not perfect, maybe it's starting to slowly kind of get past its prime. That's okay. What we want to do is we want to determine when's your product at its peak. How do we make sure that it gets to the location it needs to get to during its peak? And how do we sell it before it gets out of the peak? And that's really what a Best Buy is about. So I hope everybody goes out and buys a Steak Ager because it's amazing. So guidance on finding the right co-manufacturer. Areas we focus on when reviewing co-mans. Are they familiar with the challenges of CBD? Do they understand how important it is to hit a certain milligram? Do they have the ability to grow with you? I'm going to tell you another fun little story. Back probably like 20 years ago, I worked with a company that had a little tiny gingerbread man that sat on the top of the whipped cream, and he was adorable. He had little eyes and little buttons. So as we're getting ready to kind of build our business and scale up and have more stores, we needed more cookies. So we went to the cookie place to see if we could order some more cookies. Turns out it's a seasonal operation and they make them in the bottom of a church. So in order for them to make enough cookies for what we had anticipated we would need in the next year, they would need to start making cookies in about July in order to hit our Christmas demand. So they did not have the ability to grow with us. And we realized that and we were really sad. We had to find a solution. And the solution in this case wasn't using those little tiny cookies. You want to find someone that can grow with you. If they can't grow with you, it changes your product, potentially changes your product. And then that can disappoint your customers. So your manufacturer will have equipment set up to run specific types of packaging. Find out what those packaging options are. If you can use packaging that they are already familiar with, there'll be less setup time, there'll be less dial-in time, you'll be able to go to market faster. If you do decide that you want custom equipment, you just need to decide that early on in the process. You can start building out that plan. To get to market quickly, find a co-man that offers the options that you need and has experience with equipment you need. A location that works. So when we talk about a location that works with your distribution model, think about how are you going to ship your product? What factors could affect your product traveling to its retail location? You're going to have weather, you're going to have heat, you're going to have snow, you're going to have mountain passes. So you want to be aware of these when you pick your location of where it's going to be made and you're determining where you're going to ship the product and where you're going to sell the product. If you're doing it in the middle of winter, you could delay your product. If there's a snowstorm, you can't get your shipment over the pass. All right, so understanding your retail location is important. For this one, to move quickly, it's best to work backwards. So we have our product idea and we can picture our consumer drinking it. They love it, but where'd they get it? You need to understand how retailers choose the products they're going to carry in their stores. So sometimes, and for this example, we'll use Whole Foods. It's ingredient restrictions. So what restrictions does your retail location have? How much do they want to know about your processing? Do they have a minimum shelf life for the product? If it doesn't sell well, who owns the product? If the product is recalled, what's the process? These are built into your product with your formula, processing, and packaging. Any restrictions should be built in at your product kickoff so they can be addressed early in the process. All right, connections to commercialization resources. It's important to understand the laws in your regulatory space before creating your label. So you're going to have a nutrition panel, an ingredient statement, supplemental facts, statement of identity, your naming of product. Does a standard of identity apply? Remember our ketchup story? Nutrient and content and health claims, disclosure of specific ingredients, wording restrictions. So when you get to this point, you're building out all this information. This is not the time that you want to have to go back to benchtop. So you want to think about all of these things ahead of time and then make sure that your developer knows about this information as they're building out your formula. So in the US, CBD is regulated by the FDA and they have very specific requirements. The repercussions of not following these could lead to a recall. You don't want to be a part of that. So how long does the process take? The fastest way to move forward is have the steps on the left as buttoned up as possible so that you can focus on the right. The right side, your next steps, create the milestones that you've been working for. These milestones sometimes have the longest lead times. So have your formula ready, figure out your brand identity, complete your label, retail location. While you're working on all of those, you need to start gathering information for your next steps. If your raw ingredient has a lead time that could be 6 weeks, you want to know about that as soon as possible. So as soon as you align on using that ingredient, you can place that order. So what slows down the process? Innovating on an idea after it's developed. And we all do that, right? We go to bed at night and we think of a better idea when we wake up in the morning and we just want to constantly tweak, right? We want to make it better and better and better, put our best shoe forward, right? But redeveloping multiple times, slow it down. Redeveloping multiple times because you're changing the scope will slow down your project. Updates that aren't communicated to everyone. So maybe you woke up and you had an idea, you let almost everyone know, but not the person working on the formula, that can slow down your product. Product changes that fall out of scope. Maybe while you're researching your consumer, you realized that they're a totally new person that you didn't even knew existed. And so you're changing your product to target that person. that can have timeline repercussions. So changing or adding to a product can create like speed bumps. Maybe you are almost done. Maybe your product developer is almost done with your project, but then you've decided that there's a unique ingredient that's really hot right now that you want to add to it, but that ingredient needs to be sourced. That sample needs to be received. That can slow down your project. So as many ideas that you can flush out early in the project and vet before you come up with your kind of concept that you want to move forward with, the better you'll be and the faster you can move. For me personally, when I'm developing products, I may have ideas on how to make it better or how to make it stronger, how to make it more flavorful. The reality is that I want to get most of those ideas out early so that we can talk about them. Coming up with ideas at the end of the project isn't as helpful. So think of your project manager like a coach. Keeps your team warmed up and aligned on goals so that everybody can be flexible but focused. So continue to engage your customer post-launch. I'm going to tell you another story. So I recently purchased a Revel Winnebago. So it's amazing. It's 4-season. It's 4-wheel drive. So why is that awesome? It's awesome because current Revel owners are constantly making modifications and changes to their Revels, to their camper vans. They're making it work for them. Winnebago actually takes note of all those changes. And every year they try and incorporate more and more improvements into their Winnebagos. And so it makes their customer base incredibly passionate. Not just passionate, they're actually champions for their product. They get together with their friends and they sell Winnebagos to each other. They'll talk about what they have, they give tours to each other, and they show people what the new features are for Winnebago. So find a way to engage with your customers and find a way to make it personal. So let's see. So their followers believe in their brand, and that's what you want for yourself as well.